All right, guys. So, welcome to the channel. And I'll explain you just what we are going through now. Basically, I prepared the machine to be installed Arch Linux here. It's a VirtualBox machine, and we are going to install Arch Linux full from scratch. That means everything until the desktop environment. And I'm just going to announce you that I'm going to install today GNOME because a few days ago you might know that GNOME released a new version and it looks really awesome graphically as well. There are some new things, so I'm going to install that today. And some technical things. There is a kind of latency on the stream, which is around 10 seconds. So when you hear me basically saying something, I already said that 10 seconds ago. So keep that in mind if you have any question when we are stopping in the middle from questions. It'll take some time for me to basically to see your questions, and it takes some time to get the answers back. So all done. So this install is going to be a UEFI install. So I already set up VirtualBox for that. So I actually had to install SSH and log in with SSH in my terminal so that I could increase the fonts and you guys can see better. So the normal thing, normally when we start installing Arch Linux, if you have a US keyboard, you have no problems. You can just start installing. But as you might know from the videos I have a Swiss keyboard, and every time I have to somehow change that because otherwise I will be making a lot of typos. And for those of you guys who don't have a US keyboard, you'll have to set that up before you start installing. Otherwise, you will not typing in the correct things. And there is a command to do that. We have to first find out which key maps we have basically. And for that, we have one command which is locale CTL actually list keymaps. And when you hit enter, you basically see a list here of all the key maps available in Arch Linux. And of course, it's very it takes a lot of time and very consuming to scroll through all of them. So I press Q to go out here and I clean up the terminal. There is an option here to filter those key maps, and that is by adding a pipe symbol here and then adding the function grep, and then you have to have an idea of your key map. So in my case, for example, it's a Swiss-German keyboard, and because the Swiss is under the German keyboard, I will look for this with a DE as a Deutschland as a keyboard, and the underscore. And when I hit enter, I'm presented with the keyboards which have DE in the bitmap. So my keyboard is actually the first one, DE underscore CH lighting 1. And if I would have to load that in memory so that I can start working, I would type in load keys. Load keys and then the key map. So DE underscore CH and so on. But I've done it already before, so for me this is set. And I'm ready now to start the installation. So first point, internet. With no internet, we are not going to go anywhere. So if you have an Ethernet cable connected to the machine, you just type in IP space A, and you'll see you have an IP probably on your Ethernet connection here. By me, it's the number 2 connection. And as you can see here, I have an IP ending with 174. So I'm connected to the internet. If you have Wi-Fi and you don't have an Ethernet connection right now, you can type in Wi-Fi-menu. Well, if I type in now Wi-Fi-menu, to me, it doesn't happen anything because I don't have any wireless any Wi-Fi available anyway in my machine, so I don't see anything. If you type in Wi-Fi, you will see a list of networks. You can select yours. You'll enter your password, and then you will have an IP as well. You just have to make sure that once it's done, again, you type in IP space A, which is going to check the internet address. And if you see an IP, whether it's interface number 1, 2, or 3, normally number 1 is reserved for the loopback. This is not interesting for us anyway. Normally it's number 2 or number 3, and it will be something like WPL or something like that, Wi-Fi connection. Important is that you have an IP. Once you have an IP, we are set to go. And so let's clean up the terminal. So once we have an IP, the first thing we need to do is to synchronize the time with the internet. So let me first type in the command and then I'll explain you what it does. It's easier like this. So the command is time date CTL set -ntp space true. So basically what happens here is we are telling the system that we want to synchronize the network time protocol, so the internet protocol basically, to the computer. The time date CTL, it's a function in systemd, which is a system which controls several services of Arch Linux and actually other Linux distributions as well. It means basically time date control. And then it's followed by the function and its parameters. So in this case, the function is set NTP. So we need to set the network time protocol, and we want to set it to true so that it's activated. Then once it's done, we just hit enter, and it's going to be automatically synchronized. We need to do this just once, and then it's done. Well, this is basically it for the internet connection. Now we are ready to go to the next point, which is about our hard drives. So let me clean up the terminal. As you might have seen also in my videos, we'll type in lsblk. I love this command because it shows us a lot of stuff. And you can see in this machine here, I have a one hard drive called SDA here, which is 128 gigabytes. So this is where I want to install my system. We have a loop device here, which is not interesting for us. And the SRR0, this is the ISO of the image of Arch Linux, which is now booting up. So we need SDA. This is what we want to use. And in order to start partitioning the disk, we want to use, in this case, FDisk. Well, there are many tools to format disks, as you may know. FDisk, at the beginning, it's fairly scary because it doesn't have any interface. It's just a text interface, but in reality, it's actually quicker than many other tools. So how do we partition the disk? We'll type in first the command, which is fdisk, and a space, and then we'll just have to type in the device name, basically the device path. So in this case is /dev for device, / and then the disk name, which in our case is SDA, and hit enter. And you'll see we are presented with a line here saying we created a new DOS disk label. And we need to change this because this is a UEFI system. And because it's a UEFI system, we need to actually create a GPT label for this disk. Difference between GPT and DOS, it's a little bit long to explain this, but basically just keep in mind you could theoretically, you can actually install with DOS when you're using a BIOS system. You could theoretically use a GPT as well with the BIOS system, but for a UEFI, GPT is recommended. So how do we do a GPT label here? It's very simple. We just type in G and hit enter. And as it says here, created a new GPT disk label, and that's fine. Now that we created a label, we need to now start partitioning the disk. So this is, it can be, we can create actually here a lot of different kind of models for partitioning, but I'm going to keep it simple, as our channel try to do all the time. And we are going to create just basically two partitions. So one is going to be our EFI partition, and the other one is going to be the root partition, the home partition. We could create a third partition, having a EFI root and home partition, but I'm not going to do it in this case. I'm just going to do it a little bit more simple here. And so we're going to create just two partitions. So let's begin. And we create a new partition with the letter N for new, very simply, and hit enter. And it asks us the partition number. We'll keep the default here because this is going to be our first partition in the system. So we just hit enter to accept the default. And for the first sector here, we accept the defaults as well because the system calculates automatically what's the first sector available in the disk2 partition. So not that we have a lot of choice here. So we just hit enter. We do have a choice, however, for the last sector. This is basically deciding how big is the partition going to be. And so this is the EFI partition. It doesn't have to be big. It's going to be surely just a couple of hundreds megabytes. And I would say we'll make it around 500 megs just to be on the safe side. So for this, we'll type in a plus to indicate that it's a partition, and then the size of the partition. So 500. And for megabytes, as we see here in the brackets, we have kilobytes, megabytes, gigabytes, terabytes, and petabytes. Well, petabyte will be difficult. So let's go for megabytes, and we'll type in a capital M and hit enter. And the partition is created. It says here we have a Linux file system. It's not actually what we need, but I'm going to change this later. I could do it now, but I want to show you the commands also for partitioning the disk because they are also very useful. So let's go ahead and create the second partition. So again, we do the same process. We go N for new and hit enter. And partition number 2, well, this is the default, so we just go for that. And for the first sector, we'll accept also here the defaults because it's gonna probably go after the first partition. And for the last sector here, if this would be a root partition, and then we would also make a home partition, we would say we'll make this around maybe 30 gigabytes or something like that. But because I want this to have just one partition beside the EFI partition, I'm just going to accept the defaults here, and it's going to take up the remainder of the disk basically. So I'll just accept the defaults here by hitting enter. And now this partition is now created. It's around 127 gigabytes, which is correct, yeah. So the changes are now done. And we need one last step, is to write these changes to the disk, because if you would leave now the program, nothing will be actually recorded on the disk. So we'll just type in W and hit enter. And now, as it says, the partition table has been altered. So we can now clean up the terminal and type in again lsblk and hit enter. And as you can see, we have here the two partitions we created. So SD1, 500 megabytes, and STA2 for 127, around 127 gigabytes. So far, so good. Is there any question, guys, until here, or is everything clear? Looking at some questions in the chat. Yeah, I see some questions about Bluetooth, and another one about a desktop. What is that? If you the desktop manager, install LXTM and XT4. Yeah, okay. We can come to that a little later when we are going to install the desktop environment. We still have a long way to go until there. About the Bluetooth, is probably possible you didn't install the Bluetooth packages. We'll check this. We'll check this afterwards, if you don't mind. All right. So we formatted the partitions. We partitioned the disk. Now it's time to format. And I would say let's start with SDA1, which is going to be our EFI partition. So it's a UEFI system with a EFI partition, and it's going to have to be a FAT file system. And so how do we do this? Well, it's fairly simple. We'll just type in this command, mkfs. This is the command we use to create file system. It means make file system. Dot, and then we specify which file system we want to use for this partition. So as I said before, this is going to be a FAT file system because it's a EFI partition. So we'll type in FAT for FAT. But as you may know, there are two different kinds of FAT file system. We have a 16 and a 32. So we need to tell the system also which one of the two we want to install. And we want to install actually the 32, which is the latest one, the newest one. So for that, we'll type in a dash and a capital F and a 32. So we are telling the system to make this partition, the EFI partition, a FAT32 file system partition. Then a space, and then we'll type in basically the partition path. So it's /dev because it's on the device, and then /STA1, which is the EFI partition. And when we are done, we just hit enter. And that was very quick. It's just 500 megabytes, so the partitioning is fairly quick. Hold on a sec. There you go. And now let's proceed to the second partition, which is SDA2. And this is where we want to install actually the system. So to do this, we'll type in again mkfs because we want to make a file system on that partition. And the file system for this partition particularly is going to be ext4, which is the common type that Linux system uses. There's a lot of file systems that we could use here, ButterFS, XFS, but ext4 is the most probably popular, still the most popular, and probably one of the most mature right now. So we're going to go for that. And we'll type in ext4. And then again, the partition name. So it's /dev /SDA2 and hit enter. There you go. That's pretty quick as well. So let me clean up the terminal so that we have a little bit more space. And I'll type again in lsblk because I like to have my partitions also always in front of me, especially for the next step, which is the mounting. So mounting is very important. Here we are basically structure in the system to recognize the drives inside. So sometimes people ask me, what is a mount point? You don't understand what is a mount point. So now basically a mount point, for the people who don't know, the system recognizes that you have a drive attached to the, a physical drive attached to the computer. The mount point is where this drive basically appears to you when you're using the system. And we need to define this mount point, otherwise you'll not be able to see the drive when you use your computer. So let's first mount SDA2 because that's the partition where we are going to install the system. And to mount it's fairly simple. We just use the mount command, which is mount. Then we specify the partition that we want to mount. In this case is /dev/SDA2, then a space, and then we specify on which partition we want to mount SDA2. And we want to mount it under the /mount directory because that's the directory where the system is going to be installed. So it's a fairly simple command in a fairly simple structure. And then you just hit enter. And as usual, if you don't see any error message, that's fine. Linux is not going to tell you, yes, you did a great job. If everything is correct, you're not going to see a message. If you didn't correct, then you're going to see an error message. And then we need to also now mount SDA1, which is our EFI partition. We'll need to mount it on the EFI boot EFI directory, which is not existing yet. So here there's a lot of choices. Actually, you could mount SDA1 on the boot partition, on the boot directory. That's fine. I have the habit to mount it on the EFI directory because it's for me visually always to remember where the EFI partition is. As in the boot directory, there might be also other directories as well. So I tend to mount always SDA1 on boot EFI. The problem is boot and EFI are not existing yet as directories, so we need to create them both. We could create one by one, but there is a command actually which allows us to create both at the same time. And the command is mkdir, which is make directory. And that's a standard command, so I could now type in the directory I want to create and hit enter. To create two directories, we'll type in -p. It's basically saying -p is basically it's going to create a parent directory. So we want to create the EFI directory, and the boot directory in this case is going to be the parent directory of EFI. So with the -p command, we are basically able to create boot and EFI at the same time. So now we type in /mount. Remember, this is where the installation is going to be, and this is where we need to create these directories as well. And then we'll type in the two directories we need. So /boot and then /EFI and hit enter. There you go. Now we are ready to mount SDA1 on the EFI directory. So for that, we are going to use the same system we used before. So we'll type in mount /dev/SDA1. This is our EFI partition, remember. And on /mount /boot /EFI and hit enter. Done. Now clean up the terminal and type in lsblk just to show you that now we have here also our mount points. You can see SDA1, it's under mount boot EFI, and our SDA2 partition is under /mount. So everything looks good. So I would ask maybe here in the chat now, is everything clear? You have any questions? I will make a video on how to migrate your current OS to an SSD. That's a very good question, and definitely very intriguing. I'll look into it. Thanks, Jolly Roger. Yeah. As for the last question here, somebody's asking in the chat about having basically two drives. That's a very good question. I did also a video about that. So if you have two drives and a UEFI system always, you can create on the first drive the EFI partition and the root partition, which is going to be /mount, what we did now. And you can create actually on the second drive the home partition basically. So you will have probably SDA or NVMe 0 and 1, I suppose, as a first drive. And if you have an HDD, you might see when you type in lsblk, you might see STB or STA, depending on how the system is configured. So you go through the process as we did now, creating the EFI directory and the mount directory on the NVMe drive, and then you need to anyway partition the HDD as an ext4 as we did before, create also the home directory, and then mount the second drive under /mount/home. And then you can use basically the second drive as your home partition, yes. And that's going to be helpful in case you need to reinstall the system, because you basically can install the system then only in the first drive, and everything which is in the home partition will be saved still. Yeah. All right. All right. So let's go forward. So we mounted. Now let's begin to install the base system. This is a critical point. So to install the base system here, we need to decide, of course, where we need to install the system. And as I said before, we are going to install the system on SDA2, which is here. And as we remember, it's going to be under the /mount directory. So remember this because we need this piece of information here. So the command to install the base system is packstrap. So we'll type in packstrap. Then we need to tell packstrap where to install the system. And as I said before, we're going to install it under the /mount directory. And then we need to tell packstrap what do we want to install. So we need some packages. Well, we need to install the base package because that's the basic installation. Then we need to install the Linux kernel. So we'll type in Linux. Here you have a choice to install the current kernel, which is Linux, or if you want to install actually the LTS version, you can install Linux-LTS. In this case, I go with the latest kernel just to make it a little bit more simple. And I'm going to install also Linux-firmware. Just providing some firmware for the installation. Is probably not that I'm going to need it for VirtualBox, but if you guys are installing this on Metal, on a real PC, this is going to be helpful to have some firmware installed there. And I'm going to install also an editor because we're going to need this later, which is Nano. There are many editors we could use. There is Vim, there is V, there's many others. I prefer in this case Nano just because it's simpler to use, especially for people who are not so used at Linux at the beginning. And so you just write down the packages, and when you're ready, you just hit enter. And here it's going to take a moment to download the packages from the repositories and to install them. So it's going to take a moment here. By the way, I remind you guys, Alex and I, we started to work now also on our website. You can have a look at it if you want to. You can buy. We decided now to also sell machines with Linux on, because we think also sustainability is an important thing also, and we are basically buying old computers, and we are going to update and maybe update the RAM or the drives. And we are going to install Linux on that, and we are going to give them people warranty so that they can use it still for many years to come. Because we have, for example, some Macs, where Apple doesn't allow anymore to use the latest version of Mac OS, but you can use the latest version of Arch Linux or Ubuntu or Linux Mint or whatever. So we find that cool. So if you want to support us, just come to the website, have a look at our store, and that will be great. Thanks. So as you can see, it took not that long, about 25 seconds, if I read correctly. And so the base system is now installed, so I clean up the terminal. Now, the next point before we leave the installer and go into the installation is to create the FStop file. What is the FStop file? The FStop file is the file where all our mount points that we created before, it's going to be stored. And this file is going to be used by the computer when it boots up to remember what our mount points are. So you remember before we mounted EFI on SDA1 and we mounted was SDA2 on the mount directory. So those things needs to be stored in the FStop file so that the system when boots up can recognize again those mount points. And to do this, we'll type in this command. So I'm going to type in the command and then I'm going to explain you what it does. So the command is gen FStop -U, then /mount, then twice the greater than symbol, then again /mount, /etc /FStop. So this is the command. Basically, it says generate the FStop file. Now the -u command here, it means the FStop file is going to be generating mount points based on the UUID of your drive. So it's basically going to say we are going to use the UUID is the universal unifier identification for the drive you have. So let me shortly just delete this command here. I want to show you something. Let's type in lsblk space -f. The F option is going to show us also the file system of the drive. And you can see we have an option here for the UUID. And in this case, on SDA2, sorry, this is the partition where we install the system, we have the UUID. It's basically this one here. It's a very long number. So what we are going to say to the gen FStop is basically, I'll have to retype it in again. So gen FStop. So -U. So basically we are telling generate an FStop file based on the UUID. It's just a more sure way to generate such an FStop file. The UID is really unique and it cannot be confused with anything else. And we are going to say /mount twice greater than, and then again I type in just the command and then I tell you what it does, FStop. So basically we are saying generate the FStop file for the mount points in the mount directory, which is going to be in our installation here under the etc directory in a file called FStop. So basically the gen FStop command generates output, which is going to be stored in the FStop file under the etc directory in our installation. So the computer will remember these are our mount points when we start up the computer. All right, let me just hit enter now so that it's generated. All right. So before we move into the installer now, before we move into the installation and leave it installer, I'll check for some questions in the chat here. So show us how we can change mirror list. For me, works very slow. That's a very good point. So if you guys wonder, this is actually a very good question. The mirror list in Arch Linux, like any other distribution, is alphabetical. So you will see every country basically, but alphabetically. So I live in Switzerland right now, and my mirror is always at the bottom of the list. So I have to always pull it up, otherwise it's slow. So how do we change the mirror list? That's a very good question. Thank you. Let me clean up the terminal. So I'll show you where the mirror list actually is first. And we can type in nano, which is our editor. And we'll type in /etc /pacman-d /mirror list. Sorry, that's a space which is not intended. There you go, mirror list, and hit enter. So this is our mirror list here. As you can see, I have two mirrors here, which I cut and put on the top just to make them faster. These are the mirrors next to me. So to answer your question in the chat here, if you see, for example, let's say you're living in a country and you don't see it in the list or you don't want to scroll through, you can hit Control W and you have a search field here and you can type in, for example, I don't know, I'll type in Australia or Austria, for example. There you go. So it's here. Basically, this is the server. Well, this is the name. Then you basically go down with the arrow here. On the first line, you hit Command K to cut. And then you move up to the top of the list. I have already some mirrors here that I showed you before. It's a long list. I know. I try to scroll as quickly as I can. There you go. And you go on the empty space here and hit Control U. And then you hit Control O and enter to save the file and Control X to exit the editor. After you have done this, you'll have to refresh the database. So for that, we'll type in pacman-syyyy and hit enter. And now you'll have the fastest mirror next to you. Yes, reflector mirror list. That's also a very good tool. Yeah, absolutely. About what is, sorry, what's going Yes, about the last question about moving the OS to an SSD. Yes, definitely. As I said, it's an intriguing thing, so I'll look into it definitely. No worries. All right. So we generated the FStop file. We are ready to move into the installation. And to do this, we'll type in arch root. So basically, we want to go into the installation and leave the installer. We need to tell arch root where is the installation, and as we know already, it's under /mount. And then we just hit enter. And as you can see, also the logging prompt changed now. We are not anymore in the ISO installer, but we are now in the installation we installed before. So the base install we installed before. Now we need to perform several tasks here. Didn't get those shortcuts keys. So to cut is Command K, Control K, sorry, and to paste is Control U for the mirror list. Yeah. Okay, so I said before I'm going to create an EFI partition and a root partition. There is still one thing we need to do. It's to create the swap file in this case. I didn't create a swap partition in this system. So the swap file, the swap partition, swap file, there is always a debate. It's needed still, it's not needed. It's still recommended. Maybe swap partition was recommended, especially years ago when computers didn't have as much RAM as today, because it was using the swap space in combination with the memory to perform tasks. Nowadays, of course, with more memory, it's a little bit different. So the swap file is a little bit probably more, I would say, in tune with modern computers probably. And to create one, we'll type in fallocate, which means file allocate, then -L, and I'll tell you after what it does, 2GB/swap file. This is the command. So we want to allocate a file. The -L, it means length, but it can be interpreted as size. Then after this, we need to say how big is actually our file is going to be, and it's going to be 2 GB. Actually, it's going to be capital letters, 2GB, and then the name of the swap file is /swap file. This is very, very clear. And then we just hit enter. Now we need to also give the swap file read permissions, otherwise we cannot make it and activate it. So permissions in Linux, it's quite a big topic, so I'm not going to go too deep now in this video, but I'm just going to tell you the command is chmod 600. 600 means, just very, very shortly, the 6 represents the permissions of the owner of the file, which is in this case me, as I created the swap file. And 6 means write and read permissions. So 4 plus 2, 4 is the write permission and 2 is the read permission. So 4 plus 2 is 6. So 600 is read permissions for the swap file, read and write permissions for the swap file. So we type in chmod, which means change permissions, 600, and then /swap file, and hit enter. Now we can work on the swap because we gave permission to it. So we'll type in mkswap for make swap, and then the swap file name, so /swap file, and hit enter. And last but not least, we need to also activate the swap, and for that we're going to type in swap on. That's very clear. And then the name of the swap file, so /swap file, and hit enter. There you go. Now, the swap file doesn't have any mount point, but it has to be in the FStop file. And we need to put it in with an editor. So for that, we're going to use nano. And remember, the FStop file is under /etc/fstab, and then we hit enter. So first of all, we can see here the two partitions we mounted before. So UUID, remember we generated the FStop file with the UUID identifier. The first partition is STA2, our mount partition. This is the mount point here, which is /mount, is the root partition. The file type is an ext4. These are the options for this partition. We'll let these standards here. And then we have these two numbers here. So the first number normally represents the dump backup, which is something we are not going to into this video, and it's probably never needed in this case. The most interesting thing I would say is the number 1, which represents the file system check at boot. So that means this partition is going to be checked at boot for errors by the file system. and it's going to be the first partition being checked for these kind of errors. If we have multiple partitions here, for example, like the home partition is going to have here probably a number 2. That means it's going to be probably the second partition checked at boot, so that you know only what does this thing mean here. But now we need to enter the swap file in here. So for this, we just go under, and by the way, here you have also SDA1, which is mount point is boot EFI, file system type is a VFAT, options, and if we scroll more on the side here, we have also other things, but these are not interesting anyway for this tutorial. We want to enter the swap file, so we just go down to the empty space, and we type basically here the identifier for the swap file is the name, so it's /swap file as we did before. So next should be the mount points. Now notice that here we have a lot of space. It doesn't matter here how much space there are between these things here. There has to be at least one space. It can be a tab, it can be 2 space, but at least it has to be 1 space. So swap file space, then we need to specify the mount point. The mount point of the swap file does not exist, so we'll type in none. Then we specify the file system type. It's a swap file system. So it's a swap file. So we type in swap. And for the options, which would be these ones here, we'll just type in defaults for the swap file. We don't need to define anything else. And then we need to define also these 2 things here. So the dump backup and the file system check at boot. So the swap file does not need to be checked and doesn't need to be having a dump backup. So we'll type in 0 and then a space and a 0 again, very simply. Then we need to save the file. So we'll type in Control O and enter to save the file, and Control X to exit the editor. So I'll stop shortly and have a look at the chat here. 8 GB of RAM use or not swap? Well, I would use a swap file, just to be on the safe side, because the swap file is easable, resizable. You can delete it and create a new one. You won't lose anything. While the swap partition is a little bit more tricky. Yes. All right. So we created the swap file. Now we need to move to the next point, which is the localization. And we have several steps here to perform. Now the question is, how do you know the locales, which, the localization, the zone where you are. We need to basically put this in. Before we go on to the next command, we need to find out in which time zone you are. So if you know it by memory, you can just type it in, of course, but if you don't, there is a command to find that out. And the command is time, is actually the one we used at the beginning. So time date CTL, so time date control, list dash time zones, and hit enter. Now it's a very long file, and you can scroll through a lot here. So you see, for example, America, New York, and so on. But if you're living in Europe or in another continent, it can be a little bit daunting to go through this list here. So let me go out and hit Q and clean up the terminal. Now we pull up the same command again with the up arrow. And if you want to narrow down, let's say your location, you can make a space here and then a pipe, which is a vertical slash, and then use the grep function. Grep basically is going to extract what you are telling this function to do. So for example, I'm going to write in now Europe. So it says basically on this time zone list, we are going to filter everything which has Europe in. So I'm in Europe, so I want to know what is my location. If you are in Asia, you can put in Asia. If you're in America, you can replace this with America. Africa, the same with Africa. But when you hit enter, you will be presented only with zones which has Europe in that. So my zone is Europe/Zurich because I am in Switzerland. Yours might be America/New York or Asia/Tokyo, whatever that might be. And that's the information you need because that's gonna be used in the next command we need to type in. So let me type in the command now that we know the time zone. The time zone. So the command is ln, and I'll tell you after what it does. -sf/user/share/zone info. And then /Europe in my case, and /Zurich in my case. And then a space, and then /etc/local time. So to explain this command here, ln means link. We are creating a link between this time zone which is in the list we saw before, and the local time file, which is under the etc directory. So the S option is creating a symbolic link to this file here, to the local time file, and the F option is a force. That means we are forcing a symbolic link on the local time file or on this time zone here, and it's going to replace whatever local time you had before. So this is going to lock in basically your time zone on the local time file so that the system knows where you are. And then you just hit enter, and there you go. So now that we have the local time set, we need to synchronize the hardware clock. Well, in my case, VirtualBox doesn't really have an hardware clock, but you might have. And we need to synchronize that with the system clock that is now connected to the local time. So for that, we're going to type in HW clock, so hardware clock, and a space, then dash dash sys to HC. So system is going to be synchronized with the hardware clock, and hit enter. Simple command. So now it's time to generate the locales. So basically the language and the formats for the numbers and currency that you want to use in your system. And the locales, it's basically what we saw before also with the keymaps. So for this, we are going to type in nano. We're going to edit the locale.gen file. So /etc /locale.gen. So here we have a list basically of all the locales available in the system. And normally the first part is always the language, and then there are some variations of it. And there are two of those. One always ends with UTF-8, which is the one we need. And so, for example, I'm looking for English US in this case. I might be looking for I don't know, French or German. So German, for example, will be here. You know, Deutschland. This is the Swiss variation with CH. We're going to have also the Austrian variation with AT. We have Danish here, and so on. So you have to find basically your locale. Mine is English US, and you want to find the one which ends with UTF-8. And we need to uncomment basically the line. So we need to just delete this hashtag here, like that. That's the only modification we need to do. And then we just hit Control O and enter to save the file, and Control X to exit the editor. Now, when we type in locale-gen, this is the command used to generate the locales. It's going to look through the file we opened before, and it's going to look for the line which is uncommented. So I uncommented English US, and it's going to take English US and make that the locale for the system. So I'll just hit enter. As you can see, it's already found, and it's fairly quick, and generation is complete. So the locales are now okay. One last thing we need to do to make the system fully localized is to also edit the locale.conf file. And when I say edit, it means, again, nano. So we'll type in nano /etc /locale.conf and hit enter. So we'll type in now this string here, lang for language, equal, and then the locale you basically choose before. So in my case is en_us .utf-8. So the system is now fully localized. And again, we need to save this command. So we'll type in Control O and enter to save the file, and Control X to exit the editor. So I'm just looking through the chat here. Why aren't we creating swap when we are creating partition? Any reasons? Yes. So as I said before, I rather create a swap partition if it's an older system with less memory. With newer systems with 4 gigabytes actually could go as well, but with 8 gigabytes or more, I rather create a swap file, which I can do when I'm in the installer, so after the arch root command. And the advantage is that the swap file is anywhere flexible. You know, you can delete it, recreate it, you can resize it, while the swap partition is a little bit more tricky. All right, so next step, we have to go to the host stuff. So the first thing we need to change is also the host name. So we need to give our machine a name, basically. And for that, we have a host name file, and we need to edit that. So edit, again, it's nano. So nano /etc /hostname. So just so you know, every configuration file is normally under the etc directory. So this is almost always where you're going to find configurations files. Then we hit enter. And we need to give a name to this machine. So here you can be creative. You can give whatever name you want. I'm just going to call it Arch just to make it simple, but you can call it whatever you want to. And then again, Control O and enter to save the file, and Control X just to exit the editor. Now, also we need to edit the hosts file, which is containing all our IP information. So this is a little different. I'll explain you why. So I'll type in nano/etc again, because it's a configuration file, /hosts, and hit enter. So normally this file is used when you have a static IP. So if you have a static IP, you could connect the static IP to a domain. And for example, if you have a domain, like if you have a static IP like I don't know, 137 dot something something something, you create then you type that in, and then you type in a tab, and then the domain that you want to be connected to that static IP. Although you have to also have, of course, the DNS configured and so on. But this is where you would do that. However, normally we don't have a static IP. In my case, anyway, I don't have one here, so I'll just have to fill in with the standard information so that the web server eventually can work. And those informations are the standard ones. So 127.0.0.1, then a tab, and then localhost. This means when we type localhost in the browser, the IP is actually of the local host is going to be this one. And this is the IPv4 address. Then on the next line, we need to also configure the IPv6, which is : 1. This is the standard one as well. And again, it's going to be called localhost, have the same value basically. And then the last line is 127.0.1.1. This is basically creating the host name on this IP. So the host name we create before, if you remember, in my case, it was Arch. So I'll type in Arch. You have to replace this accordingly to what you chose as a host name. And then .local domain, then a tab again, and then the host name again. So in my case, it's Arch. And that's the default configuration. So just you just have to type this stuff in and save the file, and then it's going to be correctly configured. So we'll hit Control O and enter to save the file, and Control X again to exit the editor. Now, the main configuration stuff is done. We need to now create the password for this root user. And to do this is fairly simple. We just type in passwd. If I type it correctly, it helps. And hit enter. So now we create a new password. So you just type in your password and hit enter, and retype it again and hit enter. Now password updated successfully. So the next step is we need to install some extra packages here. So I want to install grub, which is our bootloader, for some reason loved or hated, and some other packages as well, some networking tools as well. So let's begin by typing in pacman. And pacman, as you might know, is the package manager for Arch Linux. The -s means we want to install the packages which are coming now. So the first package is grub, which is our bootloader. So because we are installing on a UEFI system, we also need to install EFI boot manager. So EFI boot mgr, this is the package name. And we need this because it's a EFI system. This is required. Then we need to install also some networking tools. So the first one is Network Manager. Although, mind you, there are many networking tools you could install here beside Network Manager, but I am used to Network Manager and it's one of the most popular. So I'm going to install this in this case. And I'm going to install also the Network Manager applet, which is going to provide us an applet to manage the networks after. Hello, Nexo, welcome. This is root password. Yes, exactly. We didn't create a user yet. And then we install also some wireless tools. So we'll type in wireless_tools. And also some tools for the security. So we'll type in WPA_supplicant. Now, we have also some tools which I want to install always because I always have to deal one way or another with some Windows formatted disks or USB sticks. So these two packages are mtools and DOS FStools. So they basically work together, these two packages here, and they give us access to FAT file system And they let us also create a file system like the FAT file system on Linux. So when I, for example, want to pull up the disks utility in GNOME, I could format my USB stick as a FAT file system because I have these tools installed. Without that, it wouldn't work. So these two packages, I always install them because sooner or later I'm going to need them anyway. And then I'm going to install also two development packages, which I'm going to anyway need probably 99% of the time whenever I install another package which requires development tools. So the two packages are base-devil and Linux-headers. So Linux-headers install packages for the latest kernel we installed before, which was the Linux kernel. If you install the Linux LTS kernel, in this case, you would probably install Linux-headers-LTS. They have to match, otherwise they won't work. So once it's done, just make sure that everything is written down correctly. Oh, wait, I think I forgot two packages here. One, yes, I forgot two packages. Sorry about that. One is dialog, which is also a networking tool. And the other one is OS Prober. I'm not going to probably need this, but if you later want to install another operating system, you're going to need this so that the grub bootloader recognizes the other OS. And now we just hit enter basically. And we'll accept the defaults here. It's going to tell us what are the dependency of each group. And hit enter here. So we need to now proceed with installation. It's going to take a little bit time. It's 177 megabytes of downloads. So we just hit enter here. Network manager and network manager. Well, no, they are the same actually, network managers. Just network manager with capital N and M, we are going to need actually to write it like this when we use system control, which is going to be used later. My Arch is working fine, excellent. That's great. All right, so the packages are now installed. Now it comes a point where I know it's kind of scary, always the installation of the bootloader. So the installation command is grub-install. So the install command for grub is composed of several parts. The first parameter we need to give to the installation program for grub is what is the machine target we are installing on. So here we have basically two choices. One, it's to have a 64-bit machine like the ones I'm installing now, or if you have an older system still with a 32-bit machine, that's another target machine. So this is a 64-bit machine, so we need to define this target. The target is -- target equal, and now we put the target machine. So the 64-bit target machine is x86 underscore 64 EFI. This is the target that we are normally installing on newer machines with 64 bits. Now, the next parameter we need to tell to the installation program is where is the directory for the grub bootloader? Where shall I install that? You remember that we mounted the partitions at the beginning. We mounted our EFI partition under /boot /EFI. And that's our directory where we want to put the grub bootloader. So we need to define that. So we'll type in --EFI directory equal, and like I said, /boot /EFI. The last parameter, we need to tell the installer what is the ID of the bootloader. So that's very simple. We'll type in --bootloader -ID equal grub, all in capital letters. So this is the full command. So again, target machine, directory, bootloader ID. These three parameters. Once it's done, you just hit enter. And it says installation finished, no error reported. So let's first generate also let's now also generate the configuration file. Then I'm going to take some questions in the chat. So the configuration file, I'm going to write this up and then I'll tell you what it does. So the command is grub-mkconfig -o /boot /grub grub.cfg. So this is grub-mkconfig is the configuration command for grub. So we are telling grub make a configuration file. The -o means the output. We are telling the configuration command to put the output of the configuration under the grub.csg file, which is under the grub directory, which is under the boot directory. Okay, because if I'm going to remove this completely and just type in grub-mkconfig, it's going to show me what is going to be in the file, but like this, I cannot use it. So picking up the terminal here. So I need to put this output under /boot /grub/grub.cfg and then hit enter. So everything what we saw in the file, everything what we saw on the screen before is going to be compacted in the grub.cfg file, which is going to be used by grub at boot. So now we install the bootloader. Let me go through the chat here if I see any question. And if you guys have any question until now, just let me know. Is it possible to have just one root user? Yes, absolutely. Well, I mean, you could theoretically have, just a root, although it's not recommended. I'd always recommend to have at least one user with root privileges. Yeah, I have a fast Ethernet connection here, luckily. Otherwise, it would take forever. So 32-bit support is not yet dropped. We have the target on grub. In this case, is not x86_64, but it's i386-PC. And then the boot directory would be the drive instead of the partition. So it's still possible. Yes, when the video will be done, it's going to be anyway, of course, recorded on YouTube, and I'll post in the descriptions the command lists. All right. So now we install the grub bootloader. The next thing we want to do is to actually activate the network manager, so that when the system boots up the next time, we have an internet connection. So we'll do this by typing in system CTL, so system control, enable network manager. And yes, it has to be capitalized N and M, otherwise it will not work. And then hit enter. So it creates a couple of symbolic links so that the system, when we boot the system next time, we have an internet connection immediately. Can we write grub-make config? Possibly. From the syntax standpoint, the grub configuration file should work. All right. So now creating a new user. Before we reboot the system, I want to create a new user because I don't like to work with a root user the whole time. So to do that, we'll create a new user by typing in user add -mg after I tell you what they do, then wheel, and then the username. In my case, I'll just go with my name. It's easier. So the user add command, as the command says, it's adding a new user. So we have two options here. The M option means create a home directory for this user. And the capital G option is creating a supplemental group for the user. So when you create a user in Linux, each user has its own defined group. So let me cancel here shortly. If I type in ID, you see here we have the UID, the JIT ID, and the groups ID. So basically, this is the user ID, the group ID, the main group ID, and the groups ID, the supplementary groups that we want to create, that the user belongs to. So we want to basically user add, I do it again, -mg wheel, and then my name. So we are basically saying create a username, name Hermano, which has his own directory and which belongs also to the wheel group. he will belong also to the Hermano group because that's created automatically by the system. But with a capital G, we are going to tell the system to make it also member of the wheel group. And the wheel group, it has to do with the sudo, so the privilege group. I know, oops, sorry, I touched here something with my mouse. I know there are other ways also to create privileged users, but I just follow here the wiki just to be on the official side. And after this command, we just hit enter, and the user is created. Now we need to give this user also a password. So we'll type in pass wd and then the username. It's very simple. And hit enter. Then type in the new password and retype it. And the password is successful. Now the user is created, but he does not have yet the sudo privileges. We need to give him sudo privileges if we want to. If you're a system administrator and you don't want to give someone privileges, you don't do that. But in this case, I'm installing this privately, so I want to do this. So again, there are several ways how to do this, but I'm going to follow the official way on the wiki, and that is by typing in editor equal nano sudo. So the sudo command is normally open with another editor, which is called v. That's why we have vi here. But I want to use nano as an editor for this file, so that's why I put editor equal nano, because sudo is normally opening only with v and v is not installed. So then we just hit enter. And what we need to do here, we need to go down until we found our beloved wheel group. And as you can see, we have two groups here with wheel. We have one which is saying all equal all, and one which is saying all equal all, no password. And that's the one we don't want to have. We need to have the one which says all equal all. Otherwise, someone also without a password who is belonging to the wheel group could also use sudo commands, and we don't want that for security reasons, of course. So we just go up to the first line here, and we have to basically uncomment the hashtag here. So let me uncomment the hashtag, and then we just hit Control O and enter to save the file, and Control X to exit the editor. And now Hermano has also privileges when we reboot up the system. So now we are ready to reboot the system once and see if everything worked correctly. So remember, I'm in VirtualBox here, so you will see I'll have to delete the terminal and reboot from there. And I'll show you also a small trick here, what I do always when I do the videos, if you are interested in that. I always install SSH so that I can connect to the machine afterwards. So to do this, I'll type in normally, this is an optional step, you don't have to do that. So we'll type in pacman -s open SSH and hit enter. And I proceed with the installation by hitting enter here, and there you go. So this is all I needed to do. So I clean up the terminal. Now, we need to exit the installation and return to the installer. So to do this is very simple. We type in exit and hit enter. And the last step before we reboot the system is we need to unmount all the partitions. And so for that, we'll type in umount. It's umount, not unmount, it's umount. And then -a. -a means basically unmount all partitions. And then we hit enter. We get some errors here, target is busy, but that's fine. We don't have to worry about that. And now we can basically type in reboot and hit enter. I'm going to be disconnected here from the SSH, so I'll have to go to my VirtualBox machine here. Okay, it's already done. So I'll close this up, and as you can see now here, I came up with the bootloader. So the bootloader installation worked. I'm sorry if it's a little small, but I cannot make this bigger. But don't worry, I'm going to go back to the SSH in a moment. So now we just proceed again with the installation. We just go into Arch Linux again. And I'm going to log in with my user, which I just created, and the password. And there you go. Now, I want to again connect to SSH because otherwise you guys don't see anything here. So let me first configure this shortly. It's going to take a second here. Yeah, see, now I'm used to the root, so I have to type sudo every time. There you go. And I activate SSH by typing in systemctl. If I type in correctly, it's better. Start sshd and hit enter. I need to have the password. There you go, IP space A. Don't worry, we'll check this after. And yes, I have an IP, so I can go back to my terminal here, 165. Hold on a sec. So SSH, hermano. And yes, accept, and my password. And there you go, I'm logged in again. Perfect. So before we continue, let me check again the chats here for questions. Sei italiano? Sì, sono italiano. Ciao Ilario. Can we open with nano by sudo? Well, you have to do it as I showed you with editor equal nano, because if you try to type in nano by sudo, it will not work because by sudo is looking for the v editor. So there is a way on how to set nano as a default editor in the whole system, but I'm not going to do it in this video. Don't you use guest additions? Well, the guest additions, I am on Arch Linux right now. Oops, sorry. And I am installing Arch Linux in a VirtualBox running on Arch Linux. And there is no 3D acceleration for the guest additions. There is a package which need to be patched and is not yet patched, and it's a little bit tricky to get that working. So I'm not going to use it for this. There is a trick for that, but I'm going to show you this later. We now boot it up. Make sure that you have an IP. So IP space A. And again, I have an Ethernet cable. So I have an IP here ending with 165. If you have Wi-Fi, right now you can type in NMTUI because we have to reconnect to the wireless. And you'll go to activate a connection. And of course, I don't have any Wi-Fi here, but because I don't have a Wi-Fi card in the VirtualBox. But you'll see here a list of your networks. You can select yours, enter the password again, and it will be saved in the system this time. And then you'll have an IP as well. So let me get out here and hit enter. Oh, well, sorry, and hit Control L to clean up the terminal. So we have an IP, we can proceed now with the installation. So the next step would be actually to install graphics drivers. So that's always a good question because there are so many different type of cards, and I hear people having problems sometimes with some, especially with some NVIDIA cards. So I give you the three scenarios. If you have, well, I'm on VirtualBox right now, so I don't actually need to install any graphic drivers. But if you have an Intel card, like I have, for example, on my main machine here, you would type in pacman dash capital S, and the package is xf86 dash video dash Intel. Okay, so if you have a graphic card from Intel, just type in this package, hit enter, proceed with installation, and you will be set. If you have an AMD card, which I have here in my main beast here at home, you replace Intel with AMD GPU, and then you hit enter. And again, you will proceed with the installation, and you'll have your AMD up and working. By the way, I have in my main system here an RX 5700 from AMD with this driver, and it works absolutely flawlessly, so that you know. If you have an NVIDIA card, then you could install these two packages. One is NVIDIA, and the other one is NVIDIA.utils. So it works for most cards. There are, of course, some configurations where you'll have to probably tweak it with some open drivers from NVIDIA. But the NVIDIA and NVIDIA utils packages, they normally work for most NVIDIA cards anyway. So that should be fine. Then you hit enter and then you proceed with installation and you will have your graphic cards. Now, the next step would be to install the display server. And this is the first step to build our desktop environment, basically. So I would install the display server by typing in sudo. Remember sudo, because now I am a normal user. I'm not anymore a root. Pacman dash capital S, and the display server is xorg. And hit enter. So enter your root password here, and hit enter. And it's going to tell you which packages are going to be installed. And so just hit enter. And proceed with the installation by hitting enter. Yes, I mean graphic cards, yes. Sì, sono italiano. Okay, so the display server is installed. We are getting close to the desktop environment, guys. Now, the next two steps are going to decide what desktop environment we want to install. So I'm going to give you the scenario for a couple of those. But I will install here GNOME because, as I said before, I'm thrilled to see the new 3.6 came out a few days ago. So to install the display, the desktop environment, we need to first install the display manager, and that is going to depend on what the display, what the desktop environment is going to be. So in GNOME, for example, the display manager is GDM, so GNOME Display Manager. If you are installing KDE, it's going to be SDDM, the Simple Desktop Display Manager. So you would basically install them by typing in sudo pacman-s gdm if you want to install GNOME, or SDDM if you want to install KDE. So going back to the question I had before in the chat here about LXDE. So LXDE is the LX desktop environment, and the LXDE package contains already the display manager. So you don't need to install this separately. The display manager for LXDE is LXDM. And you can install LXDE and then enable LXDM once LXDE is installed, basically. Um, if you want to install, for example, also XFCE, you could install Lite DDM as a display manager, which is working across platforms. KC, okay, great, thanks. um, and the XFCE4 package, plus eventually the XFCE4 goodies package. There's a lot of variations there. So I'm gonna give you the packages now for GNOME. So GNOME is, I'm gonna install now GNOME GDM for the display manager for GNOME. So I'm typing GDM and hit enter, and proceed with the installation by hitting enter. So again, it's gonna take a moment again to download and install. Again, if you chose STDM, you would replace that with STDM. And now we need to enable the display manager so that it starts automatically at boot. So to do this, we'll type in sudo systemctl enable. In my case, GDM. If you installed STDM, you will replace this with STDM. If you installed LightDM, you would replace this with LightDM as well. Just hit enter, and that's done. Now it comes to desktop environment. So I will install GNOME, but before I do that, I'm going to give you the packages also for KDE and LXD, but LXD is fairly simple. So anyway, we need to type in sudo pacman-s. That's the basic command, so installing, and then the packages. So if you are installing KDE, the first package you need to remember is Plasma. There you go. The second package, which you could install, although is not required, is KDE-applications. Then if you want to have also user directories in KDE, like photos, videos, and stuff like that, you can install also xdg-user-dirs. And if you plan to update also the packages via the software center, the Discover Software Center they have on KDE, you need to install also package kit-qt5. Otherwise, it will not work. We could install also other packages, but these are the basic packages I normally install with KDE. So that would be it for KDE. Sorry, package kit-qt5 without space. Sorry for the typo. And then if you want to install LXD, for example, you will replace everything just with one package. So LXD, that's it. And LXD, it's very light. It's like 70 megabytes in download. So just check on the chat here. We have a few questions. Just let me go for my water here. I'm thirsty. If you want to install Mate, not Mate, the Mate desktop environment. That's a very good question. So, well, Mate desktop environment, basically, you can install it by installing the Mate group. You could also install Mate-Extra, and as a display manager, you can choose one of your liking. I would take probably LightDM as it's cross-platform and fairly simple to use. All right. Before we proceed to the installation, I look at the chats here. Do you suggest to use Yay or Helper? Well, we can look at this a little later, but you can definitely use Yay. I don't have anything against Yay. Although I know some people don't recommend that, but I never had an issue with that. I do actually like to install packages with the git command, but that's a preference thing. So go back to the commands here. I want to install GNOME. So I'm going to install GNOME. And the package I could also install is GNOME-extra, which is going to install some extra programs for GNOME. But I'm not going to install this because it's going to make the download longer. It's your choice. It's really preference. I don't need this right now. So we just hit enter and accept the defaults here by hitting enter. And again, accept the defaults here for the repository and hit enter. So the download is around 343 megabytes. So I'll just proceed with installation by hitting enter. So again, guys, I remind you, Alex and I began a few weeks ago new projects on our website for sustainability. We are basically buying and updating old machines, installing Linux on those, and sell them again. We find it's important for sustainability of the hardware. We have, for example, a lot of some Macs right now available with they are not anymore compatible with the latest Mac OS. We changed the batteries on some of them and we replaced the hard disks, and they really fly, and they're going to run really for years to come. So if you're curious about that, just check out the website and you'll see what we are doing. So the desktop environment is now installed. So let me clean up the terminal. So now it's the moment of truth, basically, and we can reboot the machine. So what I'm going to do now is to, again, I have to pull up my VirtualBox here. There you go. Yeah, it's still there. Perfect. So you can reboot the machine now and hit enter, and you'll reboot into the grub bootloader. You can start your machine from there. You will be greeted by GDM if you install GDM, and you can log into the desktop. But I need to do one trick here, and I'm going to actually power off my machine, my virtual machine, because I need to change its graphics driver. Power off and hit enter. So let me close this up. And this is a kind of a trick I learned with time with VirtualBox on Arch Linux. I'm gonna change this to VBox SVGA. If I would use this driver during the installation, it's gonna crash. So I need to change this now and start the graphical interface, and it works fine. So now I'll start the machine again. Here is our grub bootloader. I'll start it up. And I enter here my password and hit enter. And now I go full screen here by hitting Control F. There you go. Let me go under display settings so that I can bump the fonts up a little bit to 100%. There you go. And we have Arch Linux up and running. So first, one thing here is you might see this icon here with the X. It doesn't mean that it's missing something. It just means that it has no volume. So you just hit here, go up here, and it's going to work normally. So that's just to make sure that you don't get scared that nothing is missing. So let's go shortly to the terminal here. Oops, I have a lot of windows open. And type in terminal and check for updates. So I'll type in sudo pacman -sYYU. If I type in correctly, it's better. And hit enter and the password. So system is up to date, but the good thing is my sudo is working well and the system is upgraded. So that's fine. So this is a basic install, guys, on Arch Linux, in this case with GNOME. Of course, there are some things, which needs a little tweaking. For example, if I go here into the settings and let me see, I go to the printers here. you see there is this system printing is not available because the printer service is not installed yet. So we need to activate this. And most probably I'd say, well, in this case, I don't have a Bluetooth adapter in the VirtualBox, so it's not showing up, but Bluetooth will be missing as well. We need to install the packages for that. But I would make now a small break and ask you guys if you have any question. Let me go log out here, otherwise I don't see the chat. So let me know if you have any question. No worry, Enderman. The video will be on YouTube anyway at the end. SYYU, because I know it's a personal thing here. You could use also SYU only. It's the second Y. It's used to force basically the synchronization of the database. I'm always scared that the database is not is not up to date. But yeah, you can use also SYU. And SYYY, as for reference, it's just synchronizing the database without checking for updates, basically. So yeah, let me know if you have any questions. If there's something which is not clear until now, if you'd like me to clear up something else. And if you want me guys to proceed also with the printer installation, might be something which might be interesting for some people. The thing is, in my case, I have a network printer here, so if I don't install CUPS, which is the service used for printing, I'm not going to be able to print from this machine. I mean, I don't need to print from VirtualBox, but on my main machine, I'll have to install that as well. Otherwise I won't be able to print. I'm planning anyway, so that you know, guys, I'm planning anyway to have another stream maybe later. I mean, not today, of course, maybe later in the month or next month about post-install task. You know, maybe like to activate the trims and the trim on the SSD and stuff like that, because it's gonna take a little bit longer. So, is it worth installing Arch on SSD? I mean, I have it installed on an HDD right now, and I can't find any. Well, I think it's always a matter of performance. I mean, SSDs are maybe a little faster. Depends also how, what you use on the system. If you're working with a lot of videos, photos, stuff like that, you might be feeling the benefit on SSDs, or if you're making some gaming, probably also. Though that's going to depend also on the graphic cards, but the SSD does also make a difference. The swap partition necessary to create. I would say so as a rule of thumb. I would say this. I would create a swap partition if it's an older system and a 32 bits, for example, processor, or you don't have a lot of memory on your machine, like 2 gigabytes or something like that. Then I would definitely create a swap partition. So they say the rule of thumb is to create the swap partition double of your RAM. So if you have, let's say, 2 gigabytes of RAM, you would create a swap partition of 4 gigs, for example. But on your machines, I rather create a swap file because we have enough memory today. There is enough RAM, 8 gigabytes, 16 gigabytes. That's plenty of RAM. We don't need the swap partition for that. And the swap file, it can be useful, to improve the performance of the system. The advantage is you can, if it gets bogged down, you can delete it and recreate it. You can make it bigger or smaller, whatever. It's much more flexible. The top program for home and office. Well, we have a lot of choice there, do we? So I can actually show you this on my main machine here. Let's go to Arch Linux. I'm such a lazy typer. Sorry, guys. So we have several choices for Office. Again, this is a matter of preference as well. The two things are we have LibreOffice, which is available through the Arch main repository. So you would install this by typing in sudo pacman-s LibreOffice, I think, if I'm not mistaken. Let me check this out. Then enter the password here. Oh, not. Okay. I don't remember the package, but maybe this one. Yeah, LibreOffice without dash. So I have it already installed here, but you could install this. This is anyway coming from the Arch main repository, so it's very simple. Um, and if I'm not mistaken, you have two choices here. You have the stable version or the fresh version, so they call it, which is going to install the latest version with the newest features. And there is not much difference with the other Office version, which is free Office. Free Office is available from the AUR. Let me resize here. I want to see the chat here. So if you go to the AUR here and you type in here free, I think it's free-office or maybe free Office. Yeah, free Office here. So it's going to be available from the AUR. So you have these two options for Office. They work both fine. Free Office I find is a little bit more similar to Microsoft Office, from the interface. But in terms of functionalities, LibreOffice and Free Office are both excellent. If you like, there is also the option to use Microsoft Office online. It's free if you want to do that. That's always available if you have an Outlook.com account. Or the Google tools as well if you want to use those. But LibreOffice, Free Office, these are the two options. About the load save screen backlight brightness, I'll have to look into that. I can't give you an answer right now. I have to look into this, what that might be. Just giving a slow boot. Okay. Yeah, there is surely an option in Grub, but I'll have to look this up. Okay. Yeah, is there how to install? How to install IDM on Arch Linux using Wine? Well, that's a bigger process. So you have to install Wine first. You go to the, if we go to the Arch, not to the AUR, but from the home here, well, you could do it actually from the terminal. We could search for sudo pacman-s Wine. Well, you have to install this first. Well, it's not here. Okay, it's probably on the AUR. So I never used Wine, so let me see. Yeah, Wine Git. Okay, you would have to install this from the AUR, install Wine, and then install EDM in there. But I haven't used it, so I cannot now give you an exact tutorial on how to do this. But I can look into it definitely. What is the difference between Linux and Linux LTS? So Linux, it's installing the latest Linux kernel, which is, let me see. You can always find out which kernel you're running when you type in the terminal uname. If I type it correctly again, uname-r. Okay, in this uname, if it's only one n, sorry, uname-r. There you go. So we have 558. This is the latest kernel available. If you are installing LTS, it's going to install the latest long-term support of the kernel. Disadvantages is, the LTS is a little bit more stable. For what it means. I mean, I use always the latest kernel. I never had issues with stability. But I can imagine in certain circumstances, maybe the LTS version offers less crashes on the system than the latest kernel because it's more tested. It's a little bit more stable as it's more mature. So that's the biggest advantage. So if you want to have a stable system which never crashes, rather install LTS. If you want to be on the bleeding edge and you don't mind maybe sometimes an app crashes or you need to restart, then you go also with the normal Linux kernel. Yeah, I understand the question there about boot times in Grub. As I said, I need to look into this specific problem. What I can do, I can copy it up and look it up, and then give you an answer on that later, because I need to check this. I need to check this up. Yeah. All right. Well, guys, if you don't have any other question, or you don't want me to install anything else, we could end up the tutorial here. This was a basic install of Arch Linux with the GNOME desktop environment. Like I said, I'm going to plan maybe another live stream in April with a post after install tasks and stuff like this, for which I have also videos there. There's several things we can tune up here in the system, but this is just a basic install. And I can tell you from my experience, I been using that in the tutorials as well as in this video. I have done nothing else than putting together instructions from the wiki, from the Arch Linux wiki, so that to be on the official side. And I tested out also some other solutions, but I've never encountered any issue with this configuration, so that you know. Okay, any more questions, or can we end it here? Just a reminder, guys, the video is gonna be anyway on YouTube to watch also later. So if you missed something, or you want to know again, you want to see again, go through the process, you can do that as well. Yes, there is another stream at 8 p.m. Yes, on Central European time. Yes, we are gonna install again Arch Linux. We are gonna follow the same tutorial. Okay, Casey, no problem. Just don't shoot me with the gun. Just shoot the question, and it's fine. And so that you know, guys, if you are installing Arch Linux, you install it now or you're going to install it later, I really want to know how you find it and how you like it, because to me this is it's my favorite favorite Linux distro. But I use Debian, I use Ubuntu, I use Linux Mint, I use all of them. They're all fantastic. I have to say we are so lucky that we have such a system like Linux, but I love Arch because it's very flexible, and you can build basically your system as you wish, as you like. And if you install it, let me know how you like it. I'm really curious, also your experience with Arch and compared to other distros as well. Um, no problem, 82 pixels. We'll be here at 8, no worries. All right. So I don't see any more questions here, so we can wrap this up. Just remember, I'm probably not going to be able to put all the commands on the description on the video. I will put probably the most important ones. But what I will do is I will post a blog post probably Monday with all the commands used in the tutorial. So you can come over to the website again and have a look also at the commands from there, and so that you can also take the chance to have a look also at our new website, which was renewed just a few days ago. And I thanks for that my two guys who helped me up, Alex and Daniel, who worked so hard on the new website. And you will see also our new store there. Arch is stable for daily use? Definitely yes. Definitely yes. Every video you see on YouTube on on the channel is created with Arch Linux and with Kdenlive, so absolutely no problem. I switched over, as an info for you guys as well, I switched over actually completely from Windows to Linux. A couple of weeks ago, I had to have always Linux because some of my customers especially businesses, need connections with Windows, so I have to have anywhere Windows installation with me all the time. But my main production machine here for YouTube and everything else at home, it's Linux based, and I chose also Arch Linux and Kdenlive. Live. And since then, since I switched over, I didn't have and I didn't experience any crash whatsoever until now. Oh, you did, Alex. Don't say that. Yes. What desktop environment I prefer? Phew, that's a difficult question, Edelman. Um, I think, honestly, they are good. Each one is good in its own. It depends on the task you want to perform. So, um, on my main machine here, you see that I have KDE, and I use KDE here not because I love KDE more than GNOME, but just because I use Kdenlive, and I know I could install Kdenlive on GNOME, but Kdenlive is built on the frame of KDE, so just to have the less crashes, I use KDE here, and I find KDE is a great desktop environment. It feels very fast, and for stacks, productive stacks as well. It's very good. I love GNOME also. It's very user, I would say. It gives you the whole space for the user. It's a little bit, it's a different concept, so it's really personal. But I love really both, and I have actually GNOME on my laptop, on my Linux laptop, and on my main production machine here, I use KDE. What are your learning resources? What do you need? What do you mean, Casey? Yes, Jolly Roger, that's the point. You can make basically any Linux distro, you can make it look like as you want to, but especially Arch Linux, yes. Yes, GNOME, the new GNOME, it's great. I have it on my laptop and it's really nice. They really improved a lot of graphical things there. It's also for the user much more friendly than it was before. And I agree also with Gary here because XFCE, it's, I would say, the underdog for me. It's still one of the fastest desktop environment you can have on a laptop or on a computer in general. XFCE and LXD, both of them. In fact, I always recommend people who have older machines to install XFCE because I find it's a great desktop environment. And actually, some distros like MX Linux, for example, which is very popular, it's based on XFCE, on the XFCE desktop environment. So definitely a great desktop environment. Yes. Thanks for the feedback about the clear instructions. This is the main focus for me on the videos and on the channel. For some, this is also how I started. I mean, Linux was for me also kind of not taboo, but kind of things I needed to learn, and it was kind of scary at the beginning. And I found actually that it can be fun to learn when you know what you are typing into the terminal. And so it's for me very important that the commands are clear and that people who are learning to use Linux and want to learn more about Linux know what command how the commands work, how the structure is, why we are doing what we are writing, why we are mounting, why we are typing gen FStab and so on. It makes sense to know also, and it gives you also a lot of knowledge about the system. And as a side note for me as well, I mean, I am now in the middle of becoming also a system administrator. I'm currently on studying the courses from from Red Hat, and I'm in the middle of the second one right now. So hopefully it's going to be done before the summer if everything goes well. Also with this outbreak, because a lot of things changed recently, um, and that helps also, of course, a lot. Yeah. All right, guys. So I think we can wrap this up for now. And I want to thank all of you to come to the stream, and I hope you enjoyed it. And again, if you have any feedback, you can also write it in the chat right now. You can also let it in the comments when the video is up on YouTube. Always appreciate to have feedback. What about for Arco Linux is good for beginners? Uh, I'd say yes. Arco Linux for who do know about that, it's a Arch-based distro, which includes also a very easy install script from Eric Dubois, I think. And it's a good intro to Arch Linux, definitely. I used it also for a while, and I found the developer there made an amazing job. So absolutely. Okay, guys. So I wrap it up. And again, as I said, the video is going to be up online soon. Leave me a feedback if you love to, and if you want to come also on the 8 p.m. stream, I will be there. And if not, there are some more videos coming up next week about backups again, restoring backups, and some other installation things. And we'll be doing another live stream probably next month or so. I'm sorry now. My mind is starting to speak in German, so it's better that we close this up. Otherwise, you guys fall down from the chair. um, one feedback I request from you guys, let me know also what would you like to see in the live streams. We have some planned already, like I said, for the next month, but would be nice to know also from you guys what would you like to see in, or what would you like to work on a live stream. So let me know also in the feedbacks under the video when it's up on YouTube. So thanks all of you for watching and for coming up to the stream, and have a great weekend if I don't see you tonight. And stay tuned for some more videos next week. And most of all, stay safe and take care of yourselves. Okay? Bye, guys. Take care.